Good morning, YouTube. I'm here to talk about the rivalry between the Pacers and the Heat. To be honest with you, there's not much of a rivalry. What people need to understand is that a rivalry is dictated when two teams beat each other. The Pacers, although they've pushed Miami to 6 games in 2012 and then they pushed Miami to 7 games in 2013, the reality is they lost both times. There could have been an argument made that they possibly could have won in 2013 because they made the same mistake that the Spurs made against the Heat. They set their big man down, Roy Hibbert, in game one, and that allowed LeBron James to go to the basket and make the shot to decide the fate for the Pacers in game one. Had they would have won game one, they potentially could have won that series. But the reality is they lost both times. So in all essence, it is not a rivalry. This is why I have a problem with the Pacers coming out and making bold proclamations saying that had we would have had the number one seed and in game 7 was on our home floor, we would have won. To me, that's rubbish. When you lose, you accept it like a man and you show it by your actions. You don't come out here talking trash. You come back and you show it with your aggression. When Kobe Bryant lost to the Boston Celtics in 2008, from 2008 back to 2010 when he had his revenge, we didn't hear anything physically from his mouth about him saying, when the next time we're going to make sure that if it's on our home court, we're going to beat them. We didn't hear that. What we saw was action. We saw every time Kobe Bryant played them in the regular season, he let them know what time it was leading up until that 2010 finals. Well, this is the same methodology that the Pacers could have used, but they didn't. And this is the problem that I have with them. They haven't proven anything. They haven't done anything. When you don't prove anything and you don't do anything, you shut your face. Yes, I said it. You shut your face. And you go out there and you show it by your actions. Now, we've seen weaknesses from this team. The weaknesses that we see are not the Roy Hibberts of the world, are not the David Wests of the world, are not Lance Stephensons of the world. The weaknesses that we see come from George Hill and they come from Paul George. George Hill has been the most inconsistent player on the Pacers. Yes, I dare say it. Even more so inconsistent than Lance Stephenson. And I thought Lance Stephenson played crazy, wild last year. But George Hill has been mostly inconsistent because his inconsistent plays has cost them that series last year when they took it to 7 games. Had he would have been more consistent, whether Roy Hibbert sat out or not in that game 1, Indiana thereby would have still won that series. So in all essence, I believe that George Hill was the biggest culprit in costing them the series last year. We have not seen an evolution of his game this year. We've seen the evolution of Lance Stephenson. I'm very proud of how he's come along because he's even playing at a higher level than Paul George. But I'll get to that later. But George Hill, it's the same old, same old. He gets bossed around by Mario Chalmers. He gets bossed around by Norris Cole. He allows those guys to dictate the pace of the game. He allows those guys to play the Miami Heat style point guard game against them, and he allows them to get in his head. And we see that every time they play, and he just makes the most errant passes I've ever seen somebody make. It's like he just basically makes a pass in a stealing lane for the Miami Heat. Who does that? See, I don't understand that. But see, what people need to understand is this guy is not a point guard. And there's a reason why San Antonio got rid of him. Because San Antonio saw the writing on the wall with him. They saw that he couldn't be there in their future. Hence, you see the decision that they made, it served them best because they got guys like a Patty Mill, they got guys like a Tony Parker that they still have. I mean, it was the right decision to make. So basically, I felt like Indiana got set up. I wouldn't have paid a guy like that $8 million a year. He's not worth that. I don't know why he's getting that kind of money. To be honest with you, he looks like he's playing like he deserves the league veteran minimum, if you ask me. I don't know if he even deserves that, because a lot of the games that they've lost, he's cost them. He doesn't know how to feed the ball to a guy like Roy Hibbert. He doesn't know how to feed the ball to a guy like David West. And if you see, he's always having arguments, in his backcourt with Paul George, and he's always having arguments with Lance Stephenson. He is the most inconsistent player. And I believe when Roy Hibbert was talking about the selfish guys that are on the team, I believe George Hill was one of those guys that were on the top of his list. Because if you notice, if you go look at some stats that they got out there, George Hill has been the biggest culprit in not giving Roy Hibbert the ball down low. Now, granted, Roy Hibbert did run his mouth and talk, and then He had that game where he had 5 straight touches and he didn't do nothing. I'm a firm believer that if you run your mouth, you got to back it up. But Roy Hibbert is not the culprit, because sometimes people are going to have bad games. Sometimes guys are going to play bad. So I'm not going to put the onus on Roy Hibbert. I'm putting it on George Hill, where it truly belongs. It seems like he's been under the radar, and I'm surprised the Indiana Pacers have not made a decision to get rid of this guy. Doesn't make any sense to me. It's appalling. You know, it's asinine on the highest level, if you ask me. And then you got Paul George. You know, the off-the-court issues such as catfish, you know, having a stripper baby mama pregnant. I mean, these are lingering issues that a franchise player should not be having. These are issues that can ultimately decimate your team, and they can pretty much fracture the confidence of your team. I mean, my goodness, he is the franchise player. Act like it. I mean, you know, all of the criticism that I have versus against a guy like a LeBron James, one thing I don't criticize is the way he conducts himself as a franchise player. We don't hear nothing. We don't ever hear him engaging in anything ridiculous outside of the basketball court. Yes, I could say a thing or two nice about LeBron James when it's not pertaining to his basketball game. I mean, the reality is he is a consummate professional. When you look at Kobe Bryant, yes, he had a Colorado situation, but since then, I mean, the man has been a consummate professional, you know, and that's how you're supposed to act as a franchise player. Now, mind you, when the Colorado incident happened with Kobe Bryant, he was not the franchise player, it was Shaquille O'Neal. But since Kobe Bryant has taken over the reins of the Los Angeles Lakers, he has acted as such, and we have not heard anything crazy from him. The reality is, these off-the-court distractions, being the guy who is supposedly supposed to ascend to a superstar level, you're not supposed to have any of these things associated, especially when you're coming out with your teammates and making bold proclamations that you're going to be the #1 team in the East, and that if a Game 7 is decided on your floor, you will beat the Miami Heat. That doesn't make any sense to me. To be honest with you, it's appalling. You know, to be honest with you, it's just a bunch of nonsense. So I feel that Paul George, you know, he hasn't pointed the fingers to who the culprit truly is, which is himself. Because although I feel that George Hill is the biggest culprit in his inconsistent play, Paul George gets a bigger nod because he is the guy that's supposed to represent the franchise. And if his head is not in the game, if his confidence is fractured, and if he's in a weakened state, how is that team going to survive? It doesn't matter how tough David West is. It doesn't matter how tough Roy Hibbert is. It doesn't matter how tough a Lance Stevenson are. These guys are not the franchise player. The franchise player is Paul George, and he needs to act as such. All of this crybaby stuff saying, oh, LeBron James, I need you to mentor me. I think that took a toll on the team. To be honest with you, I think it made a lot of the teammates on that team lose a lot of respect for him, because at the end of the day, LeBron James is the enemy. You know, it's not to say that guys haven't gotten mentored by guys who were older than them, who were in the game before them. But when guys did this, they always were astute enough to understand that you do these things when the cameras are not around. You do these things either in the off season, you take advantage of this stuff during the Olympics, or when the guy's not a threat anymore. This is the right way to do it. But to sit there and to say you want a guy to mentor you when that guy in all essence is trying to dominate you and destroy you, it doesn't make any sense. If anything, you should have the killer instinct yourself to want to come at a guy like that. This is why I believe that Paul George, he might end up being a disappointment. I have him, you know, the way that I'm looking at him right now, I have him looked at as a Danny Granger 2.0. Yes, I said it, a Danny Granger 2.0. And the reason why I'm saying this is because if people forgot, Danny Granger was in the same nice, comfortable situation that Paul George was in prior to him getting injured. But he fell out of grace with Larry Bird because he obviously did not pan out to be the player that he was assumed to be for the Indiana Pacers. Back when he was playing in the Olympics and he had a lot of promise, we all know how that story panned out. What's the same case for Paul George? I think personally Larry Bird regrets playing this man $90 million. To be honest with you, this goes back to what Michael Jordan was talking about. I believe it was in 99, 2000 when he was interviewed after he retired, and he was on Oprah, and you know, he was clowning Charles Barkley around about Charles Barkley not winning anything. But Jordan made some impactful points. The biggest point that he made that I liked was he was saying you know, you got a lot of guys coming out nowadays in the league, and they're just getting all of this favor, and they haven't done anything to earn it. And we're seeing a lot of his predictions, his bold predictions at that time, we're seeing it manifested. Obviously, we've seen it, you know, with LeBron James to a certain degree, but we're seeing it now with Paul George. I mean, I just saw a commercial with him, you know, I believe it was a sports drink commercial with him, you know, dunking the basketball and him going, ah! Where is that same ah in the game? I don't see it. You know, this guy's weird. Like, it seems like his man crush for LeBron James is on 100,000 trillion. I don't get it, because ever since LeBron James gave him a handshake, he thinks that he's affirmed. He thinks that he's arrived. No, you are not arrived. You got to have that Kevin Durant mentality. You see, when Kevin Durant got beat by LeBron James in 2012, he's been on a tear ever since. You know, he's even come out to say, hey, I'm tired of being number 2, man. And you see it in his game. What did he do against LeBron when he played him this year, man? He lashed that boy up. The game when he came down in Miami, LeBron was guarding, man, he was putting it to him. This is what Paul George needs to do. He doesn't even use his quickness. Because I keep telling everybody, LeBron James is a horrible on-ball defender. So if Paul George uses his first step, if he uses his speed to his advantage, he would be able to make LeBron James look really bad. Although he did it a couple of times in that fourth quarter that kind of helped the Pacers win 84-83, he wasn't the main benefactor. The main benefactor was Lance Stephenson's, you know, psychological toughness. That, I think, when he left the game, it gave them a psychological advantage, and the momentum swung their way, and that's how they were able to win that game. But Paul George didn't do anything impactful. But the stuff that he was doing in the fourth quarter, how come we don't see enough of that? So my problem with Paul George is you have to take the responsibility. That's why I respect guys like a Derrick Rose. That's why I respect guys like a Kevin Durant. Because when they mess up, they put the onus on them. You know, guys like Kobe Bryant, I mean, always putting the onus on him. This is why I respect players like that. You know, and this is if Paul George is saying that not only LeBron James, who I don't think is going to be a great mentor to him personally, if Kobe Bryant is another guy that he wants to get mentored from, Kobe's not a threat. You know, Kobe is pretty much in his twilight years. You can learn from a guy like that. You know, you can learn some of the things you need to learn, because Paul George seems like he's still 5 years removed from being where he needs to be at. And I think ultimately, because of the weakened state that the Pacers are in, this will ultimately decimate their chances of them, you know, giving Miami Heat a showing. If anything, they've strengthened the Miami Heat's confidence. The Miami Heat's looking at all of the issues going on with the Pacers like, oh, this team was talking all of this trash, but they're not ready for us. And it's not like the Miami Heat is great like that, but if you're coming in playing a team like the Miami Heat with that kind of mentality, you can't expect to win the series. And the Miami Heat, I don't think they're going to be trying to win this game, because I think the Miami Heat got a taste of what the Brooklyn Nets did to them, and they're like, we don't want no part of them. Because what people don't fail to realize, I think, to be honest with you, Miami tanked that game in Memphis, because the Miami understand that if they keep that number 1 seed, they got to play the Brooklyn Nets in the second round. And based off of the way the Brooklyn Nets has been playing them, they don't want no part of that team. They want an easy road. Anybody that gets the number 2 seed in the East has an easy road, because in the first round they play the winner between Toronto and Washington, if Toronto still keeps the 3rd seed. And in the second round, they will play the winner of I believe the winner of, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's not Brooklyn and Chicago. It's going to be the winner of the Bobcats and whoever the Bobcats play. So that's the problem that I'm having. You know, the problem that I'm having with this team is that, you know, they have a whole bunch of issues. And Miami Heat is just pretty much going to take advantage of that. You know, the other issue that I'm having is that, you know, I would love to see competition in these. I would love to see the Miami Heat push. The problem that I have with the Miami Heat is that they are not being pushed. And if you look at the last 2 years, the reason why they were able to get to the finals because they had two easy first rounds. The third round was the only round that was hard. This is why I want the Miami Heat to win the number 1 seed. And to be honest with you, I don't mind if the Pacers lose and keep the number 2 spot. If anything, with the weakened state that the Pacers are in, it's best served that they stay in that 2nd seed because they'll have an easier road if they are going to get to the 3rd round to get there than the Miami Heat. because at least the Miami Heat will, see teams like, the Brooklyn Nets in the second round before they get to a hard third round. And if they make it to the finals, to see an OKC in San Antonio. That right there will strengthen my confidence to know that if they have 3 opponents that they have to face in those 3 rounds like that in 2, 3, 4, it will ultimately decide their fate. But this is the reason why the Miami Heat are always scathing past teams. And this is why the NBA is always helping them out. Now, I can't stand that because they always make the Miami Heat's road easy. They always make LeBron James' road to the finals easy. And this is how he's able to take advantage of teams that have beaten each other up because they played in more physical and more tougher rounds prior. But the reality is, both teams, the Pacers versus the Heat, people keep thinking that these are the 2 teams in the East to look out for. I don't believe it. The team to look out for is the Brooklyn Nets. So, in all essence, what I'm trying to say is that when the Pacers play the Heat tonight, I'm expecting, even though, Frank Vogel has come out and said he's going to start all of his guys, I'm expecting the Pacers to lose that game because of the mentality that they have. They've been shooken mentally. We've never seen this kind of breakdown before. And if they are smart, they better tank this game because, like I said, it will be an easier route for them and they won't have to deal with the Brooklyn Nets in the second round. I would just feel sorry for any one of those teams that have to play the Brooklyn Nets in the second round, especially the Miami Heat, because you and I both know the Miami Heat love things easy. So if they love to continue to have things easy, it's best served for them to not get that number 1 seed and to act like they're going to play tough in this game and ultimately give this game away. Now, them not having Dwayne Wade play, that's obvious that they're probably going to try to tank this game because they're not gonna mind that Indiana takes the number 1 seed. See, people don't understand. LeBron James is very aware of his circumstances. He knows that the Brooklyn Nets is a team that's going to be a team to deal with, and he's not going to want to have any parts of a team like that. So it behooves him to keep that second seed. I just think both of these teams are overrated, and I think all of the talk and hoopla about these teams were just all for nothing. I think the teams that people need to focus on, other than the Pacers and the Heat, is the Oklahoma City Thunder, the San Antonio Spurs, and the team that I've been talking about the whole time, the Brooklyn Nets. This is He Knows His Sport. Checking out.